What does it take to be number one, as in the number one children's hospital according to U.S. News Best Children's Hospital 2023-2024 ranking? Yep, Barflies, we are joined with Cincinnati Children's finest, Justin Meyer and Angela Saunders, to discuss their culture and perhaps the upcoming RSV season. This is RT Sidebar. Stay tuned.
All right, Barflies, we are back for another episode of RT Sidebar with two of my favorite people in respiratory therapy, now respiratory royalty? Question mark. Justin Meyer and Angela Saunders from Cincinnati Children's, good friends of us in the RT Sidebar. Justin, you're the clinical manager for the Children's, and Angela, you're senior director. Am I saying that correct?
Yes, you are.
Yep, she's my boss.
So Justin, behave. JB, like, we got a chance to hang out with them a little bit down in New Orleans. I see them everywhere when it comes to recruiting. You guys are recruiting machines right now. So I just want to say thank you so much for jumping on. Like, this is a big deal for us here at RT Sidebar, the number one children's hospital. You and we're not going to say who you dethroned, but that's a big deal. Like, children's hospitals take U.S. News World Report rankings very seriously, probably much more seriously than adults. So we're going to get into it just a second. JB, my partner in crime, always good to see you, my friend. And we have Anna Hayes, producer extraordinaire, herder of cats. Maglin's always here because he's always here. Taylor and Angela, thank you so much for always helping out. Guys, let's jump into it. Number one hospital. It had to take some planning. It just doesn't happen like that. How and why?
We're starting off loaded, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
This is something we've been working towards for so many years. And, you know, for many, many years, we've been 2, we've been 3, then we dropped, then we're back to 3, and then we're 3, and then we're 2. And finally, I think this year we were surprised, but we were also not surprised. I think we've worked really hard, the whole organization. We put a lot of things in the forefront. Diversity, equity, inclusion, huge part of our strategic plan, right? Being the best at getting better. That's something that we are doing here. That's something we're going to continue to do, because nobody's at the top. The top can always get better. And that's kind of how our CEO thinks, that we can always be better. So I think we've all kind of taken that on, and we've all really devoted our time and all the things that we do towards, getting that. And I think finally we're there. Everywhere, pulmonary, cardiology, neonatology, cancer, GI, everybody has just really worked hard. Everybody's excelled. Urology. It has taken everybody. And that's the thing. It takes everybody. It's not just, the medical teams. It's just not nursing. It's just not respiratory. Yeah. It's our business side. It's everybody. And I think, we're one Cincinnati Children's, and by being one, that's how we achieved one. So
I think that's awesome. Justin, thoughts from a clinical?
I think the biggest thing that Angela said is, since I've been here, I've been at Cincinnati Children's since 2013, and it's very easy to see, that the strive for year after year to strive to get better. There's not a lot of complacency as being stagnant at where you're at, whether that's, the way you do bedside care, or the way we market, or the way that anything you think of it, that there's always changes for improvement. So I think that's the biggest thing that has kind of pushed us to the top, that we're always trying to get better and not getting complacent and falling behind.
Yeah. Anna and I were just doing a webinar about Awake and Walk in ICU, and culture is a big deal. So describe your culture, like how, because you got to get everybody bought in. You have 200 therapists. Like you're like moving a cruise ship, not moving a dinghy. Like how does that work? How is that like a priority in your own leadership?
you're not going to get anywhere unless you're rowing together, right? We're going to talk about boats. Let's go. So I think that we're a division. We are a division of respiratory care. We have 2 locations. And like you said, we have about 200 respiratory therapists, about 250 employees, 2 to 2. Well, yeah, around there. We have clinical assistants, we have respiratory care techs, and we are all here for the same reason. And that's the first thing you have to do. You have to everybody needs to know their purpose and why they're here. And we are here to take care of children the best, the safest way possible. So as long as we're all on board with the mission, then we can, work together. And because we're a division, it's nice because we can work as a division. So the ICU therapists are just as important as our general care therapists. Our ED therapists are just as important as our trach vent population therapists. So everybody in the division, we work together to make sure that we're taking care of the patients together, and not be siloed. And I think that's probably the most important thing, not doing that siloed care, because if you look at a lot of our patients, they move throughout the organization. So they see respiratory therapists in the ED. Then they might go to the ICU for a little while. Then they are discharged to our general care floor. They might come back to the emergency room, or maybe they go to surgery. So they touch so many different places, and we take care of them in all these places. So we have to take care of them together. We have to provide consistent care and safe care. So I think that's part of it for sure.
Yeah, I think just everybody's encouraged to, like I said before, improve, but and work to strive and improve together. It's not one person. We're doing things to grow as a team, which transitions us into providing great care at the bedside. I have employees all the time coming to me asking for opportunities for improvement. That's a culture we've developed, that people want to improve, and whether that's in education or getting involved in committees, getting involved in our coordinated care, changing policies and procedures, all these things. These people are, I would say most of the time, I'm not seeking them out, or Angela's not seeking them out, or other managers aren't seeking them out. They're seeking us out to get involved, which is encouraging, because that tells you right there that they're invested in improving and advancing in their career, which directly correlates to improved patient care and outcomes.
I mean, your team must feel, that the door is open and they can go in and talk to you and be proactive. And so that's a sign of good leadership there. And I know how big this hospital is and how many people there are. There must have been a ton of initiatives that you did to get to this point. This is not something where you just say, I want to be the best and become the best. There's a lot of hard work that you two put in. So what were some of the big initiatives that you kicked off to start down this pathway to number 1?
Well, I have more than Justin as a clinical manager, which I think is helpful. So I have myself, and then I have 8 other clinical managers. So they all have their own areas. So it makes it nice because they always have access to somebody in leadership. And like you said, open door. We are definitely open door. We're open door so much, I feel like some days I don't get anything done. But I think one of the big initiatives is when people would leave the organization, and when COVID first happened, and a lot of people left to go travel, it hurt all the hospitals, adults. It hurt healthcare, period, not just respiratory. And we were hurt. We were bitter, of course, because loyalty is huge. But we had to reshift our focus, and we had to reshift our focus on, okay, let's figure out what staff want. If it's not bedside care, what does staff want if it's not, to clock in and clock out every day? And just taking a deep dive into other things. So let's not think about just retaining the respiratory therapist. Let's talk about retaining the employee at the organization, because turnover to me used to be a respiratory therapist that would leave the organization or even go somewhere else within the organization. But now I think of it differently. I think of turnover as just somebody that leaves the organization. So if there's someone here that, you know, wants to go into marketing, that's a respiratory therapist, how do we make that happen? So I'm not a marketer. I don't know anything about marketing, but we have a whole marketing department here. Let's do some shadows. Let's do some coaching and figure out, like, do they need to go to school? You know, what do they need to do? Or maybe they do a shadow and they're like, this is not for me, but I saw something else on the way. So just getting people exposure. So we had to rethink the way that we retain our employees. And we are not the best at this. And, you know, we take surveys and things, and we take a lot of the data from the surveys to make improvements, and we really make the improvements, or at least try to. So I think those are different things. We've partnered with other places to see. I just partnered with some DAP students at the University of Cincinnati to take a different type of look at our recruitment and retention, really think outside the box. And I think that's helped us. I think the open door policy helps us. I think giving staff some non-productive time to do some work that they find meaningful, whether it's research or education, has helped with our employees. I just think being present has also helped. Our leadership team's pretty present. We have a manager that's on call 24/7. And then I'm on call 24/7. So there's always someone that they can get a hold of. So I hope that our staff feel supported, and I hope that that's a reason that, you know, they're happy and they stay here.
Just real quick, I think it's important. You said something that's really important about retention, because I know that you guys, along with your teammates, have done an extraordinary amount of work in retention and recruitment. Like, you guys, especially you're the recruiting machine. When it comes to retention, you said something that it's not retention if they leave the department. You know, like, it's okay to leave the department is what you're saying. Have you had a lot of therapists grow into other things at Cincinnati Children's?
Yeah, so we have the normal opportunities. So you can work on being like a lead therapist or a clinical manager, an education specialist, the norms that most hospitals have. But we have had respiratory therapists that now work for our IS department, so integrative services here at Cincinnati Children's. We have respiratory therapists that work in our Anderson Center, which that's our quality improvement area. We have respiratory therapists. I actually have a really good story about one. I had a manager that worked for me, Mary. She is always very interested in safety. And we have safety consultants. So safety consultants deal with patient safety situations. They can help with regulatory things. And we've never had a respiratory therapist really sit at that table. It's mostly been nursing. And so what we did was we just got her some exposure. So if there was projects that had to do with safety, we gave those to her so she could network with those other employees. And then a position became available, and now she's a safety consultant for the organization. And there's only I think 4 of them. So that's a big deal for us. So just not patient care related. Like I said, IS, we have people that work for our electronic medical runner, not electronic medical record. In the simulation center, we have clinical instructors. We have instructors at some of the universities around here. So there's a lot of opportunities, I feel like, for respiratory therapists. You just have to really explore those. And I think you have to have somebody to support you and help develop you into those other areas.
I agree.
I forget any area.
Yeah, I have some questions on that. So Mary, in the example of Mary, did she come to you and say, I want more, or did she come to you and say, hey, or a different therapist, let's just get a little grittier here. Did they say like, hey, I'm kind of burnt out. Like, I don't know what's next. And then you helped coach them figure out, here's a possible avenue? Or did Mary say like, hey, I think I'm interested in this. How can you support me? Because there's kind of like 2 different conversations there. Like, one RT can be like, I'm super burnt out and I don't know what to do next. One could be like, I'm a go-getter. I want what's next. Help me achieve my personal and professional goal.
Yes. So both have happened with, I mean, this happens all the time. This isn't just like one success story. When we have, we call them stay interviews. So a lot of times you hear about companies doing exit interviews. right? Like, why'd you leave the organization? What could we have done better? Instead, prevention's the key. So having those stay interviews, like, why do you stay here? What is something that would make you leave? So really understand like where your employees are at. We do those. It was actually part of our strategic plan this year to have stay interviews with all of our staff. So we ask certain questions and really kind of take that deep dive. So some people come to you or have come to me or my managers and they're like, wow, I know I'm new here, but I really want to be a leader someday. What can I do to get there? So, let's set you up for success. We can meet, quarterly and talk about this. These are things you should do. But we've also had people like, you know what, I can't physically do this job anymore. I can't emotionally do this job anymore. But I love Cincinnati Children's. So what else do you think I can do with my degree? I only have a 2-year degree. I don't feel like there's options out there. So that's when we kind of explore, ask them questions like, what are you interested in? Do you like people? Do you like human resources? Different things. And then, so like a few people, for example, did job shadows on the business side and human resources, research, and we've gone kind of from those. What did you like about these? What did you dislike? What can we do with our degree? And then we, work with our human resources partners and things to see what can you do with an associate's degree? What can you do with a bachelor's degree to get them to where they want to go? So we've had both. And Mary, I'd say Mary's a little bit of both. Hopefully she doesn't mind me sharing her story, but Mary's a go-getter.
Mary.
She is, she's a respiratory therapist and she is excellent at whatever she does. She's always been a go-getter. She always wants to do better. But Mary would often ask a question of, well, what's my purpose? Like, why am I here? I don't feel like I'm making an impact. So to me, she needed something else and she needed more. Because Mary always likes more. So that's how we kind of got there. And she got, I remember when she first started as a manager, we were in a meeting and someone was giving a presentation and she was like, who is that? What does she do? And it was actually the director over occupational health and safety. So that kind of opened the door to the safety situation and kind of went with that. And Mary networked a little bit on her own. And then, we got her some opportunities and it's really helped her be successful.
Okay, I do want to dive into these two things, the stay interviews and the job shadows. Are job shadows normal? Is that something that like hospitals across the nation offer? And like, how do you make that feasible? I see Butler shaking his head. Okay, how is that possible staffing wise and HR wise? And then the stay interviews, if I'm like a new RT director, I think that's a great idea. How often do you have those interviews? Is it online, like through like a Survey Monkey, or do you do it in person? And what are those questions? So I know that was like a lot of questions. Yeah, but let's start stay interviews. Let's go nitty gritty on that.
Okay, so stay interviews. So your most at-risk employees are your employees that have been with you for 2 years or less. So you definitely want to hit your new employees. So this past year, we did them 100% once a year. And then we had a goal to hit 2 years and above at, I think it was 75%. I could be wrong. 75% of those staff, we ended up hitting 100% of our division. So that was a one time a year. So that doesn't mean that you don't have one-on-ones throughout the year, but that's like once a year that you ask those questions. So I think once a year, I don't think it hurts to do it quarterly. I think it depends on your capability too, and how many employees report to you. But the questions we ask are, what brings you to work every day? Right. So, I mean, it might be my paycheck could be the answer, or it might be, well, to take care of kids, or it might be, I like everyone that I work with. There's so many different answers. And then, different things that you could change. We wish our profession was seen more in a different light, or I wish we had more autonomy, or I wish we were paid more, or, I mean, we've had it done to even like, I wish we got, coffee served to us on the unit, all kinds of things. And then it just creates, different questions that you can ask them, and you can, take that deep dive, and you can kind of analyze your trends and see, where are your shortcoments. I was using the example about, like, tell me if you want me to bring you a Snickers every day, like, say that. Give me that as your answer. Like, if that would make you never leave Children's Hospital, if I brought you a Snickers every day, say that on this interview so we can learn and grow from it, just as a silly example, but that might be it. Like, have candy in your candy dish. That might make somebody feel supported.
We talked about the Ted Lasso effect, and the first thing he did was like fix the water pressure, like that. So I totally see that. Are you the one conducting these interviews? Who's doing the stay interview?
So the clinical managers.
Clinical
manager. You guys split up. You guys split up your team. So Justin, you have like a team of people that are your people that you do your stay interviews and do follow-ups with.
Right. So I manage the ED and the cardiac ICU. So all the people in the ED and the cardiac ICU, I did stay interviews with. Okay. But I think something to stay interviews don't have to be like formal. I think what's really good is when managers are just visible sometimes and available, because you'll find out a lot by just walking around. How are things going? What's going on? How's life? How are you doing today? Things like that. And you find out a lot just by doing that. I get so many good ideas from my employees. Like, hey, why don't we do this instead of this? Because this is going to make our life so much easier. And I think when you listen to that and take that input, that makes them feel much more appreciated. I think that's part of why we have slowed down, our turnover. I think just having simple, honest, open conversations, and it's just overall builds morale. It makes the employee feels like they're valued. They appreciate. They feel like you're out there and you want to help them, help the patients, and they just makes it. When I wasn't going to say this, but I guess it will not make, because will make more sense. What I'm going to say is, I was in the Army prior to working as a respiratory therapist, and one thing that one of my favorite leaders ever said to me is, lead from the front, and shared suffering will always create the best soldiers. Because a leader who goes out there and talks to their employees, and when things are bad, helps them. So these are little things that aren't formal stay interviews, but our leadership team, I think, is good at doing that. They get out there, they see their employees. And as far as like, how we were talking about with Mary and giving her opportunities, I think there's, I at a lower level, of course, than Mary, I have employees that I talk to that I have to push to do things like, you really should go get your bachelor's degree because you would be great at A, B, and C. Then I have other employees that come to me and say, hey, I would really like to get involved in teaching simulations, or I would really like to get involved in, some committees about policy and things like that. So you get both sides, people you got to push that will be great, and then you have other people that ask for it. So, but you find these things out by just maybe a 1-minute conversation while walking around the unit one day.
I think you have to be able to, a good leader recognizes other people's potential, their potential before they even do. And there are people on our leadership team that if you would ask them, they would said, I would never be a leader ever. So I think sometimes when a leader approaches people and says, like Justin said, you really should do your bachelor's or your master's or get involved in this, it kind of sparks interest. Like, wow, somebody really sees something in me. Somebody sees some strengths and they recognize that. Maybe I should explore that avenue. So not everybody can do that.
What I like about that is the value that it adds to the organization. So a few departments that I used to manage was risk and quality. And then I'd be in several RCAs. And what you find is when there's an issue or a breakdown and it's over multiple departments, is because they're speaking different languages.
Yeah.
We might speak anatomy and physiology, but once you get to the department level, everyone has their own language, right? So like if you were talking about IT, whenever I would build out my EMR, I'd have to work with a nurse informatics person, right? And it's very difficult because, we're not speaking the same language, but we're trying to build out the respiratory section of the EMR. and I'm trying to do it through a nurse. The value of being able to work with an ex-RT who's now in informatics, and he or she's a RT informatics person that's building out the MR, the value there is huge. You know, and then the same's going to apply for your quality, your safety. You know, when people think clinical, they always think nursing. And I think it's a fallacy, because nursing is still a bubble. And there's a lot that happens outside that bubble that they're not aware of, because it's just outside their realm. So to have someone, you know, what I would call them, and I would teach people when they would go into different departments, I'd call them bilingual, right? You're speaking, and you can speak 2 languages, and that value that you add to the organization is huge.
Yeah. JB, just real quick, I think you said something really important, that bilingual piece. Like, there is no other department other than lab and x-ray that goes everywhere other than respiratory therapy. I think that we might be the best translators because we talk to everybody. We have to.
I just had this conversation
Mm-hmm.
before I started this meeting about how allied health.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, different hospitals are different, but here allied health touches every site of care, and we communicate horizontally. We don't communicate vertically all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We don't always have to. And it's totally different, like you said, because we speak all the languages.
So if we speak all the languages, and Jonathan, I know you did risk, you're doing quality, where out, because for years, you could go into education or management. That's what you could do if you don't want to be a bedside therapist. Those are your only 2 options. But I'm finding more and more you can go anywhere. Like, where else have you seen respiratory therapists kind of delve into? We have IT, we have risk, like Mary, a safety consultant. Where else can a respiratory therapist go?
I
would say an underutilized.
Go ahead, JB.
Sorry. Go ahead. No, I was just going to say an underutilized area would be case management for that throughput piece. That's huge for an organization. And again, you get into a respiratory patient, and now a nurse is trying to manage them from a nursing standpoint, not a respiratory standpoint. And there is a fall off there. Mm-hmm. So now to have an RT in this realm, I think the throughput on a respiratory patient would be way better.
Agreed. Justin, thoughts?
I think here at Cincinnati Children's, what I've recognized, especially since COVID, I think it highlighted it more, but our value. So I get emails, phone calls, you know, in-person conversations like, hey, do you have an RT, or would you want to be involved in this? Hey, we need an RT that we want to be a simulation instructor. Do you have anybody you think would be good? So like, I think people are starting to recognize the value we bring to different aspects other than just at the bedside providing, care. But I think Angel does a great job at trying to grow the profession internally. And when we go to the CHA and stuff, she also communicates, sees what other hospitals are doing, and shares that info. You know, like I know she's looked into like because in our emergency department, our RTs put in IVs and stuff here at Cincinnati Children's. So like, why can't an RT be on the VAT team, our vascular access team, things like that. I think also looked at like stuff like working more closely with anesthesia and doing inductions and things like that. Like, why not? Why
working on the CVO?
Yeah.
Cath lab. Like, I think there's a lot of opportunities as long as it fits within our scope under our license. Or if it's a position that you don't need a license for, I feel like we could do anything. Another area is we have our own value analysis team that we work with for all of our disposables. I mean, you all know we are one of the biggest users of disposables, probably next to like the OR. We use a lot of stuff. And because we are such a small family of respiratory therapists, we know all of our salespeople and our reps. So when we're running out, we can just, phone a friend, and usually we can save the day. I think discharge planning. Yeah, I think our opportunities are endless. And I really do.
Like, it's great having our respiratory, value analysis team, because anybody that's worked as a bedside RT will know they've used a piece of equipment or a disposable, man, this is junk. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So for example, like, I'll just give you a quick example. We like to have a substitute for a substitute because of COVID and the supply issues, all that stuff. It really highlighted that you need to have substitutes for substitutes. Yeah. So, in these, when we do these meetings with our, we call it our RVAT, but one of them was a full mist. We were low on one, and they were going to use one for a sub, and we had to basically tell them that people have used this before and it's not a very good product, or they have something that's not even the right thing. I can tell you that they were showing a bubble humidifier versus a full mist, like, so, and that's like, and RTs know that, but a lot of times you have either supply chain people or nursing that might not know what some of this respiratory equipment is. So having us directly involved in that has really, I think, helped identify quality substitutions and prevent bad equipment getting here and then directly affecting patients. So I think
quality, sure.
And vice versa. We know if we get asked about something, we know who to, like, I'm not going to answer for ET tubes. I'm going to ask anesthesia, right? We know who to ask to help make the decisions, because nobody wants somebody to make a decision about what they're going to use to take care of their patients. We need to work together and find the experts to, make those decisions. So.
Absolutely. And Peggy Bartram, the DoorDash of medicine, hilarious. Thank you so much for that. Peggy also mentioned that in California, RTs can sit for a care manager exam. Like, that's a big deal. And Jonathan, you're from California. Like, using RTs in a different way, I really think brings value. And I think that's really what you're trying to tap into. Talk a little bit about when you do the stay interviews, you get to know your people. I know you're collecting data because you guys are so data driven, and I know that you guys publish some work on employee retention. Can you talk a little bit about what that looked like? Because I think that has a direct relation to your culture at Cincinnati Children's.
Yeah. So, our respiratory care team, we have a group of employees. We have a lot of employees that work on research and different things like that. We really need to grow in that area for sure. But we have a group of RTs that have worked for a few years on morale. They've actually presented at AARC. I think like the last 4 or 5 years. They're going back this year, so go see them. Yeah. So they kind of ask the same questions quarterly. And they take that information, and then they see, like, kind of what are those themes, right? And then they have a lot of times they'll either send another survey, or they'll have groups of people come in and have open discussions about certain questions so that they can kind of take that deeper dive. And then what they do is they take that information and they present it to our leadership team. So it is not me collecting the data. It is not my managers collecting data. It is all staff driven, which I think is very important, because they know what questions to ask, because they know what people are happy about. They know what people are disgruntled about, so they can kind of get the nitty gritty. So they take that information and bring it to the leadership team, and then we kind of talk about and come up with a plan together. So we've changed things like we work every third weekend here, but we go by a certain year. And if you were hired 2019 and prior, then you get a free weekend off a year. Okay. And every year we change that year because we used to never change that year. But then it got brought to our attention, like, well, we keep growing and people keep getting hired on. Well, do you guys ever look at that? So then we decided once a year, like every new January, we're going to change the year another year. So now next year will be 2020 and behind. So we're kind of looking at that. There's a lot of stuff that we want to do we would like to do about seniority. We just can't do it mathematically now because of how many staff we have and or onboarding people. But some things that we would like to do is maybe one less holiday if you've been here 20 years. Staff wanted to be recognized for being here 20 years. So we call them the Golden Buckeyes, because Buckeyes, Ohio's state.
The Ohio State.
Well, we call them the Buckeye. And so we have a luncheon every year and it's just for people that have been here 20 years. And they sit down, we get people to cover the unit so that they can leave if they're working, or they can come in. And we kind of just play some nice music and just sit down and have lunch. We also have it to where you don't have to float to another unit. So we do some things, and those are all based on survey results and morale. We did what we call a code lavender based on a survey, and we need to do that again. It was pre-COVID, and it was awesome. We had a room, dim lighting, we had massage chairs, we had snacks, we had candles, but we had our child life and integrative care bring dogs and stuff. And so everybody got to like play with the dogs and everything. And we had the chaplains there. So it was just very relaxing, and people got to take time for themselves for a minute during their shift. So we are going to continue to do those now that we can, have the dogs back up in the department and things like that. But we do little things like that. Here's a prime example that came from that. Can you please stop ordering us pizza? Can we please have something else to eat when you order us food? So we order pizza. It's easy. So yeah, great. You want Mexican? Or do you want, sandwiches, or do you want cookies? So, we developed from that a QR scanning code that staff can scan. It's called HOT, honest, open, transparent. And I can put questions on there. It's totally anonymous. It dumps into Microsoft in the team forms, and then it goes straight into Excel. So I can ask that question. I can say, hey, I'm going to order out next month. Do you guys want sandwiches, or do you want chili, whatever. And people can put that on there, or they can ask me an anonymous question, and then I will go out and answer it. So that's been pretty cool. That came from that. So there's a lot of things that come from the data.
That's awesome.
I feel like we have a great response rate from staff. So
JB, when I think about this, because we think about leaders here on RT Sidebar, we think about it a lot, is leadership's not about your clinical care. It's about the people that you care for. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you haven't mentioned one clinical initiative yet. You're talking about your people. You're talking about, this is what we are. You're talking about culture. Was it tough during COVID? Did you guys lose a few along the way? And how did you keep their spirits up during COVID? Because Jonathan and I, we both don't work in the hospital anymore because of that. So how do you keep people engaged? How do you keep them invigorated? I love what you're doing with your shared governance stuff, but what else during the bad times?
So our hospital, Cincinnati Children's, was amazing during COVID. And I don't know what a lot of the other hospitals did, but they really supported the staff with pay and things like that. Because when it first happened, everybody was scared, of course, because nobody knew. Leaders, we were working, 24 hours a day. We're having meetings at 11:30 at night, on Saturdays, just so that we could get everything in place. So I think everybody was tired, everybody was stressed. But the hospital did a great job because they paid people when they were off work, because we weren't busy. We stopped surgeries, we stopped procedures, our emergency room was empty. So our census was down. we were down running about 40 ventilators a day from 100 to 110. So, people got to be home with their families, which I think was really good. But then, we got really busy, and then people got burnt out. And I think the mental health situation, it took a toll on people. So we lost a ton of people to other jobs. We had a lot of early retirements. We had a lot of people that quit because they were just didn't want to chance it. But we had a lot of people who actually lost family members to death and things like that. So I think there were so many different emotions going on, and it was hard, but I feel like it's almost harder getting back to normal, because now it's now we can really start to do things. I feel like another pandemic, okay, we got this. I think everybody does, whether it's adults or kids, but now, how do we go back to where we were, but start to progress forward and start to really do things? How do we do more clinical initiatives, things like that,
Mhm.
getting back to like that norm on what we should be doing. I think that's probably the hardest part for people.
Interesting. Jonathan and I both managed adult hospitals during COVID, and we looked at our children's hospital colleagues and were like, "Oh, it's not hurting them at all," but it did in the long run. Like,
Yeah.
like you were like a second wave
Yeah.
of not so much fun, and it was tough. It was tough. And children's hospital work, spending the majority of my career, it's hard. It's hard up here, and it's hard in your heart.
Right.
To manage it every day. It takes a special person. So I asked about the bad times because in every children's hospital, the bad times linger when the snow starts to fall or when you go back to school.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So we, and Anna, you can, when you cut this up, then you can add the Game of Thrones piece, but winter is always coming in a children's hospital, and you're the best. What do we need to do in other hospitals as respiratory therapists to prepare for this? And, what do you see it looking like this year?
I think what I said earlier, how we have substitutes for substitutes, because you don't know how big influx you're going to get, right? It's so, with COVID, flu, RSV, all these things, things are kind of unpredictable since the pandemic as far as like when they're going to hit. Before it was like clockwork. Late September, early October, you see that uptick in flu and RSV, and last year was over the summer. So
Yeah,
I think you need to be prepared, especially now more than ever. But should have been the case pre-COVID, but now more than ever, you need to be prepared for these things all the time. So we have our subs for our subs. We have a really good business continuity plan. We have plenty of equipment and ways and contacts to get or rent equipment in a pinch. We have good relationships with local hospitals that if we need, if we run out of oxygen, we could call out to right next door to one of our adult hospitals and say, hey, we need 10 H cylinders, and they'd be more than willing to send them over. Things like that, I think, are really important to have not only your in-house situated, but have a good network of people outside of, because you think you're prepared until you're not. So I think having that network of people outside of your own facility, talking, we have good relations. We talk to other directors at the CHA and stuff, because you can ask them questions. How did you handle this? How did you deal with this? So these things, you got to prepare in-house, but you also got to have good networking and good, people you can reach out to, when you need it, and vice versa, because that goes both ways.
And as much as it's a competition with our, rankings and things like that, because that's how we started this conversation, right? It is, we all like to joke around about it. When we go to CHA in October, of course, we'll wear our number one shirts, because we're Cincinnati Children's and we're number one. But we also are emailing each other, all of these children's directors, and asking, hey, what are you guys doing for this? Are you experiencing this? Does anybody have a protocol on this? We help each other. We just went to Seattle Children's and looked at their research program, because we are all working for the same thing. We are, like I said at the beginning, we're all want to improve children's health. So why are we going to compete with each other? And that's even like in the city of Cincinnati, we have so many hospitals like right walking distance from Cincinnati Children's. We borrow stuff from each other all the time. Somebody will call me today and say, hey, do you got 2 of these circuits? We can't get any. Yeah, that's great. I'll bring them over. So we have to work together to take care of people, whether they're babies or adults. It's just what we do because we're in healthcare. So
give you a good example.
I'm a first-time leader. I just got hired this summer. I've never gone through this before. What would be top 3 things of advice you'd want to give someone like that? going into a, RSV or flu or whatever? What did you learn over COVID? What are like those top three things I got to get down?
Make sure you have staffing. You got to have people. And if you don't have the people, figure out how you're going to use the people you have so that you can mitigate that.
Okay.
Make sure you have supplies, medication, and I'd say relationships with the physicians to have, good protocols and plans in place for taking care of the patients.
I would say number one, in my mind, would be communication, whether that's with.
I feel like that's given.
Yeah, like that's like I know, and it's an obvious
Good
thing.
communication.
It really is an obvious thing, but like,
yeah,
No, it's the first thing to improve too. Is always
Yeah.
communication.
It's always the first thing. Yeah.
it's if you're not communicating with your fellow leaders,
Mhm.
your staff, like you're bound to fail. You really are. So I think above anything would be communication.
I was
Whether
thinking like operations, but yeah,
right, but I mean,
For sure.
those are
you're right. I'll give it to you.
even as a
There you go.
even as a bedside therapist, the thing I always wanted from a manager, I did it and don't like being micromanaged, but I just wanted them to be available when I needed them, right? And communicate with me. That was the biggest thing. And now that I'm on the other side, I do that. I know how I felt, so I communicate with my staff. But in addition to that, I've learned to communicate better with different disciplines, providers, things like that. So I think and it's not just it's how you communicate. It's a lot of things. So a lot of times it's not. I've found with working with people, different personalities, you gotta be a good communicator, not just with frequency of communication. It's knowing the right tone, how to present something, things like that. So just learning those little, ins and outs of communication, little tricks.
Yeah.
I guess I would call it
Generationally.
Yeah,
being able to-
generationally.
You gotta communicate different.
Sometimes you gotta stroke somebody's ego a little bit. You know what I mean? Make something. Might have to make something sound like it's their idea, when really it's your idea. Because I guess, and I know nobody's ever heard this.
Cracking me up.
But certain physicians have big egos, and nobody's ever.
No, never. That's never
So,
happened. They teach them not to have egos in med school. That's what they teach them.
There's just ways to communicate and present things that I think is it. So I guess, yeah, communication as a whole would be, I think, is the most important.
Mhm.
What would be your number 2 and number 3, Justin?
Number 2, visibility. I think.
Oh, okay.
Yep, visibility.
These are just manager period if you're gonna manage.
Yeah.
I feel like
These
not
are.
to get ready for
Yeah, that's good though. It's
RSV.
different levels. Everyone has
Yeah,
their own.
but even in RSV, I think if they see you out there,
Right.
again, that
No,
goes.
I agree.
That
Yeah.
goes to my what I said, when I was, in the Army, like, the shared suffering, like that, when it was, times were dark and it was rough, and people saw managers in here at 3:00 in the morning at the bedside if they had to be.
Yeah.
That goes a long way. And I think that helps prevent, during the pandemic, prevent your burnout, prevent people wanting to leave your hospital. It encourages people and pushes them to do better, because they see their leader out there. They want to work harder, not for you, and in turn, the patient. So I think visibility during the pandemic was a big thing too.
Yeah, I'm saying overall, you're giving good advice
Rounding
to
out number
someone
3.
who wants to be a leader.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Number
Angela
3.
thinks more operational.
Well, oh yeah, you gotta
Because
give them credit.
she's above me, so like she's got more, like, she's a little more removed from the bedside than me. So
She's looking at your
That's true.
spreadsheet. She's looking at
Yeah.
your spreadsheet. That's what
She
she's
does
got to
not
do.
know how to make spreadsheets.
Yeah, but this is
I
good though.
do.
You got top 3 for a director and top 3 for a manager. I mean, this is good. So what would number 3 be?
Number 3. So what did I say? Communication, visibility. Oh, let's see, number 3. I don't know why I'm stuck on it, but I am.
Well, it sounds like spreadsheets is number 3.
Yes, spreadsheet.
Number 3 is to do what your director tells you to do.
That's exactly
Yes.
right.
Yes.
We're trying to help you out there, Justin.
How to be successful.
Thank you.
Do what Angela said.
That is awesome. So what is next? I mean, it sounds like you prepare, you're doing all the right things, you're leading by example, you're being servant leadership. Like what is the plan for Cincinnati Children's moving forward? How do you maintain this? How do you keep it going? And what are you working on now?
So Cincinnati Children, so we are going to continue to be the best at getting better. It is our thing. So that's what we're going to do. With high rankings comes patience. So we have to prepare for that. So we're preparing for that. With the recruitment and retention, we decreased that. We decreased our turnover by about 64% this year. Next year, I want it to be 75%. Like we are going to continue this because we're just going to grow. Our profession's going to grow. So you're always going to have turnover. And we don't know what's going to happen next year. So we're staying ahead of the game. So we're continuing our recruitment efforts. We're continuing our retention efforts. We're looking at improving some things with asthma at the organization.
Okay.
We worked a lot on the albuterol shortage this year. So we're continuing to stay on top of that. Some other things that we're working on are things that we've kind of already mentioned, like what other places can respiratory therapists be seen? What tables can we sit at? So I will always seek opportunities for our respiratory therapists to sit at more tables. We would like to have a bigger research footprint. That's a hard thing to do in respiratory as a profession. I think the AARC too just put out on the respiratory care journal, I believe, about research and respiratory therapy. It's hard. A lot of our staff are associate's degree therapists, and you don't get any research in those 2-year degrees really, because you're learning how to be a respiratory therapist. So just growing that knowledge base and getting the people that want to do that. Start them small. Let's do how do you even look at evidence? How do you grade that evidence? How do you understand it? So just doing some things like that. And I don't know, working with the community, we're doing some
I like that.
All kinds of stuff.
I like that. Speaking of research, shout out to newly Dr. Jonathan Butler. He could tell you everything you need to know about statistics and research because he had to do it just recently.
Awesome.
I just wanted to congratulate you on that. JB, to you. What did we learn today from Angela and Justin when it comes to being number one?
You know what I think I like the best was that it's a true career ladder, right? So if your career ladder is only within the respiratory department, it's more like a career step stool. This is a true career ladder. This is how you keep people. This is how you add value to the organization, just not your department. And I know that I would lose staff over the years, especially before I could even implement NICU training or PEDS training or lead training or bronch training. They would feel stifled and stuck in their career and then go and leave for, other opportunities. To provide that internally, especially knowing that you need a larger workforce, that's ideal. I really applaud you both for that, because that's a heck of an achievement.
I would agree. I think that's the reason why you're number one, to be honest. I think that you are building people, and by building people, you build an organization, and then you can take over the world later. But you got to start internally, and you're starting to take over the world. And any takeaways for you?
Yes. The power of networking. I think so many times in this episode, like you've talked about like Mary and how she saw someone who's doing a job that she was into and she networked on her own. And then within yourself as like a senior director with all the other children's hospitals, like you've networked and that you've created a network. And I think like to myself, it's like like I gotta keep creating my own network and like the importance of that. And so it's really refreshing to hear. And like we didn't really talk about the job shadowing. I'm so curious about that. Like I want to job shadow. Like that is so cool. And like that opportunity is so unique. And like what a great way to network and solidify the seat at the table. Like you're able to do that and you're at all of these different tables because you've networked. And like that to me, it's intangible and it's so important. And it's a skill, it's an art, it's a craft. So I just am like in awe of that. And like I also think that should be an RT sidebar episode in itself. And then what you're doing, what you've just described, Angela, I'm like, oh my gosh, we have to have you back on to discuss all of those things. And so you just dropped the bomb of a 64% turnover rate reduction. Like that's like incredible. So
unheard of.
Yeah.
Unheard of.
And like, okay, sorry, I have to ask this question. Why is the 2-year mark the most risky?
Under 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years or less is the riskiest employee. Why?
I think there is evidence to support this. Actually, I worked with one of our AVP nurse leaders, Karen Tucker, on this. She's doing her dissertation on it. There's just evidence out there that they're your most vulnerable because they're new to the organization. They don't always know everything. And a little bit of it's generational, chasing that dollar kind of thing. So you can be easily persuaded, like the loyalty thing. It's just a little different now. So there's a ton of literature out there about it. And I don't know as many specifics as like she does, but we partnered together. She worked on nursing. I worked on respiratory therapy, and together we were able to work with all the other nurse leaders and, really make an impact. But it's just such a vulnerable state, like the socialization of that person when they start, like, do they feel welcome? Just so many things can impact you in those first 2 years.
And I feel like you're at a point of either you figured it out and you're stagnant, like, are you still growing? And there's like this. So like, I so feel for that 2-year mark. Yeah. That's super interesting.
I don't have any data like as far as the under 2 years, but just from my experience, what I've noticed, it's just, and I think most people would agree, if you're under 2 years experience, you're probably the vast majority of those employees are young. So, probably 25 or younger. And it's easy to pick up and move or to another job and all those things when you're much younger. I think that's a good, when you're not established, and, so I think that makes it, I think that's what makes them a good portion of why they're vulnerable to leave an organization.
Yeah. And I think
the literature was like years 1 through 5 were the most vulnerable. So usually like a good strategy is you make your annual step increase the highest between years 1 and 5 to retain those younger generations that are chasing the dollar. I mean, like me, I got student loans to pay off. I got to make sure I'm getting paid top dollar, and I'm assuming the same applies for them. They got a student loan to worry about. They can't make less if, across the street or down the street is paying, an extra $5 an hour. So, it's a struggle.
It's also interesting because Jonathan and I and you guys work big hospitals. You slap Cincinnati Children's on a resume, you can pretty much go anywhere in the country. I mean, that's the hard part of being the top. So, I mean, great place to recruit, but you could just lose people along the way. So we're at an hour. I just want to say thank you to everybody for being on here. And once again, congratulations to the Cincinnati Children's team for all of that they've accomplished. And, my biggest takeaway today is people matter more than anything. Take care of your people and you're going to be okay. So there's a couple call to actions. We have Angela. We talked about this before you jumped on, but your conference is September 15th. Is that coming up? Yes. And where is it? I heard it's in a fun place.
It's at the Great American Ballpark.
Nice.
Yeah,
Cincinnati Reds. That's what it's saying.
That is so cool.
Making sure it hasn't changed. I mean, we're killing it right now. Well, not this week, but
no, that's awesome. And our next pod is on August 24th with Krista Sala from Vanderbilt Children's. We're doing August is Children's Month, so we can get all the snot out of the way before they start before they start school. So we had to make sure that that was all taken care of. So thank you so much. We have some shout outs. I hate to start with this one because I know what he's going to say. JB, what's your shout out?
That's because my shout out is to you. Matt, you're one of my closest friends. I love working with you. And you just recently celebrated the anniversary of your 21st birthday. And so happy birthday.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
There.
I spent it in Arkansas. I had a great time in Arkansas with Ramsey and Candy. Shout out to Baptist Health in Arkansas. I had a great time. Angela, any shout outs for you?
For me, shout out. Can I shout out just my team?
Of course you can.
My leadership team, my Cincinnati children's team, my boss, Dave Mayhouse, he's awesome. And then all the respiratory therapists at the base location in Liberty. That's my shout out.
Love it. Justin, let's hear it, buddy.
I'm going to start with the SVTM Vikings. That's the football team my health coach and my son plays on.
I got to shout out to my kids. I'm interrupting. I got to shout out to my kids. And Adrian, my husband, who's also a respiratory therapist. That wasn't fair.
We weren't here.
You got to do work.
When you're late,
you were late. You know, you don't forget anybody. You're going to get in trouble. I like to shout out to you guys. Cincinnati Children's has been, a wonderful partner to us, and we really enjoy you. So I want to shout out to you guys, to Mike, Shannon, Anita, Jen, Joyce, and Doug. I also want to say shout out once again to Dr. Jonathan Butler, one of my best friends as well. Anna.
And happy birthday, or wait, I just always say happy birthday. I'm gonna cut that out. I usually have the happy birthday one. Congrats to Jake Walter and Tom Myers on their promotion. Good news is, Angela, anyone else listening to this, there is a link in the show notes where you can give a shout out to anyone on any episode. We take a look at that link about like 15 minutes prior to the episode, and that's how we make these shout outs. So link in the show notes, give a shout out. That could be an anniversary, a graduation, a promotion, whatever it is. We love to celebrate you. And again, it's all part of the network, and we love to do that. There's another link in the show notes to register for our next episode with Vanderbilt Children's. That's vtherm.com/RT Sidebar. You can join the live recording there. I think that's it.
Wonderful. And congratulations, guys. Really, really awesome. And thank you for your partnership with us. We really appreciate it. So well done.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Vapotherm does not practice medicine or provide medical services or advice. Any clinical recommendations provided herein are solely those of the speaker. Practitioners should refer to the full indications for use and operating instructions of any products referenced before use. The team behind the sidebar are employees of Vapotherm, and our guest is not compensated.